guessed it, we are back with another episode of the Under the Dome podcast. In case you forgot, I'm your host, Ben Belden. It's been a long time, and many of you have not heard me on these airwaves since about this time last year. And really the only explanation I have for that is that the pandemic took a lot out of all of us, and for me, it took out kind of my will to prepare for podcasts, record podcasts, promote podcasts, find guests for podcasts, and everything in between. So, if you've never done a podcast before, there's a lot of work that goes into this type of thing. And for some reason, during the pandemic, other things took precedence, and the podcast took a back seat. But it dawned on me that at one point in my life, as I've told others, I spent a lot of money on podcast equipment. And I put a lot of time and sweat equity into making a podcast. And it would be a shame to just never revisit that again and to, just let that get washed away. So we're back. We're going to have some, a new podcast format just a bit that I'll touch on. And I think it's really going to be good to, get back on the airways and talk about Notre Dame football, college football in general, the team and the sport that we all know and love. So like I say, I'm back. I'm Ben Belden. You can find me on Twitter at RealBBelden, and that last name, by the way, Belden, RealBBelden on Twitter. You can also find the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. So if you run across this on YouTube at Under the Dome Podcast, then you can find the podcast format. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, all those places where podcasts can be found. You can find it there. Like I say, go to the YouTube link, like and subscribe. Today's episode is a little bit more hastily thrown together than I usually would have liked to have done it in terms of the video quality and that type of stuff. But, we're going to continue to get back to where we were, high video quality and that type of stuff. So you're going to want to make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, click that little button so that you get notified every time we post a new video and keep up with everything that has to do with the Under the Dome podcast. So all of that out of the way, I've got a quick little, a little disclaimer that I'm going to make here at the beginning. Then we're going to dive into some stuff Notre Dame football-wise. Like I say, we're back, and hopefully that means that we're back and we're better than ever because, I'm going to change the way that the podcast works a little bit, I guess you could say. In the past, you probably became accustomed to 35, 40, 45 minutes to an hour's worth of podcasts. And certainly there will be times where that's appropriate. But, as the podcasting world has evolved a little, we're going to evolve with it. And, what other podcasts are doing, both, I've seen them do this in the Notre Dame sphere, in the college football sphere, in, other podcasts, political podcasts and things that I listen to. There's the opportunity to do some quick hitting information a little bit. And, I really like the idea of doing that, getting on, making an 8 to 10 minute video, 15 minutes tops, and pushing that out there at all of our platforms just to get more content and just so it's quickly consumable on a 15-minute drive to work and that type of thing. So you're going to see a lot more of that type of stuff out of the podcast. Quite a bit. It's just going to be me. But certainly we will have some guests on, some of your favorites from, other seasons, I guess you could say. And really we're going to hit the ground running. Like I say, today, really just decided to sit down with the old laptop, use the old laptop camera if you're watching on YouTube. So really, the video quality, not as great as it's going to be because, like I say, this was sort of a spur of the moment, let's get back in the saddle type of a thing. But we're going to continue to get better, improve, and do all of that type of stuff and really kind of try to improve the video aspect. So YouTube, all of the places where you go for podcasts and all that things, if you go those places, I'd really appreciate it. So that said, let's get back into Notre Dame football and college football talk. So obviously lots to catch up on since the last time that we posted an episode, which was an episode where we discussed, will we even have a college football season before last season? Yes, that's exactly how long it's been. So Obviously, I realize I'm a little late to the party on some of these news stories. I'm kind of catching back up. But like I say, I wanted to get back behind a microphone and just talk for a little bit. So since we've last talked, the big thing in this season, this go-round of the college football season, is that obviously the college football playoff, the speculation is that sooner rather than later, this college football playoff is going to expand to 12 teams. And so there's speculation within that there would be 4 teams that get a bye between the conference championship week and whenever the first week of the college football playoff is. And those 4 teams get a bye. The team ranked 5 would play 12, 6 would play 11, 7 would play 10, 8 would play 9. And the higher seeded teams would host on their home campus. That's the speculation. And so obviously, there's a lot of talk about how this will affect Notre Dame. And we're going to get to all of that in just a second. So we're going to table that for right now. The other big thing within the past couple days is the news that came out a couple days ago that Texas and Oklahoma are thinking about leaving the Big 12. Obviously, as the news has continued to unfold, that was confirmed by a joint statement that was released by the 2 schools. And just this morning, as I record this podcast, it was confirmed that they will apply to enter into the SEC, which would make the SEC into a 16-team mega conference. And all of that would occur when the contract between Texas and Oklahoma ends with the Big 12 in 2025. So 4 years from about right now. So like I say, lots to catch up on and lots to talk about in terms of how this impacts Notre Dame. So first of all, let me say this, okay? Right now, we are at an unprecedented time in college football where we are seeing the sport as we've kind of known it really, really change. Like, I think really right now, when we look back at this in 10 years, we're going to go back to July 2021 as this was the turning point for how college football is. And, it's big. And really the point that I guess that I want to emphasize is, appreciate what's going on right now because there's all kind of great talking points, and this is where it becomes different. Okay, this is the changing of college football. These are the first dominoes to fall into what college football is going to become as we progress into the future, and I just can't emphasize that enough. College football is changing. Okay, it's a big money business. Name, image, and likeness, which we really won't touch all that much on here. In this particular podcast is another big thing that, has happened, but we're going to kind of, like I say, we got a lot to catch up on and we want to keep these quick hitters as quick and as possible. So we're going to table that for another discussion. But college football is changing and it's a big money machine. It always has been. And the way that college football is changing, I don't know that we will see these wholesale changes to this magnitude. I just can't think of when this happens. Something this big happens again. Certainly there was a big change when it went to the college football playoff where instead of just the 2 highest BCS teams play for the national championship, that was a big change. But now it took forever to go from 2 teams playing for a national title to 4 teams playing a playoff for the national title to now making the huge jump from 4 to 12 teams. This is huge. And the conference realignment that probably I think is going to happen is huge as well. So back to Texas and Oklahoma. They're leaving the Big 12. And so, first of all, another thing that I want to just throw out there right now, I know that Texas and Oklahoma are not leaving the Big 12, quote unquote, until 2025. But I bet you any money that this takes place way, way sooner than 2025. Okay, I think a lot of people are kind of thinking, okay, well, we've got a couple more years of normalcy. We've got all of these things that are going on. We've got a little bit of time to adjust to this. No, I really don't think so. Okay, first of all, if Texas and Oklahoma really wanted to stay in the Big 12 until 2025, why are they announcing that they're leaving the Big 12 4 years prior to applying for citizenship, if you will, in the SEC? Okay, you just don't do that. This is the equivalent to the employee that looks around and is like, man, I really don't like my job, and so I'm going to go ahead and put in my 2 weeks notice. But I'm doing this because, hey, boss, I'm doing this because, I am looking for other opportunities to broaden my horizons, whatever the situation may be. Take 2 weeks, I'll work for 2 weeks, try to find my replacement so that then I can maybe train the new person, that we can hit the ground running, so on and so forth. And then the boss looking at him and saying, hey, this relationship's probably broken. I appreciate your, willingness to be forthcoming with this information, but let's just go ahead and sever the relationship right now. And that's exactly what I feel like is going to happen between Texas, Oklahoma, and the Big 12. I think they play in the Big 12 here in 2021, maybe another year after that. But by 2023, when we're having this conversation, Texas and Oklahoma will not be in the Big 12 anymore. I bet any money. With the way that money gets thrown around, the way that people have, the need for immediate gratification, and the way that the college football landscape is changing, I think it necessitates that Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12 get together. They find a good way to get out of this contract a little bit early and just move on. And so, like I say, this transition I don't think is as gradual as people think it will be. And so my immediate thought when this Texas-Oklahoma news came to fruition was that it's time now for some more uniformity in college football, especially with the way that the college football playoff is changing. First of all, then, let's talk about the Big 12, okay? As I see it, the Big 12 is gone, okay? There's no, when you take Texas and Oklahoma out of the Big 12, the two biggest brands in the conference, how in the world does the Big 12 survive this? I don't think they do. I think it's time to dissolve the Big 12 and for the athletic directors in the remaining Big 12 schools to start looking for new homes for their schools. These schools, the West Virginias, the Kansas States, the Iowa States, the Oklahoma States, all those TCU need to find new places to play sooner rather than later. And I think they will. I think that all of these teams are going to be like, yep, we got to leave too. We got to do what's in the best interest. And eventually, like I say, the Big 12 is just going to look at this and be like, you know what? Forget this contract. Thanks for the run. Time for the Big 12 to just move on and ride off into the sunset. Okay? And so for me, that's perfect. Okay, that's the perfect scenario here, is that within the next 2 years, no more Big 12. First of all, was the Big 12, did anybody take them all that seriously to begin with? I know I sure didn't. There's always the argument, do these Big 12 schools that, compete in and around the college football playoff rankings, the top 4 of the college football playoff rankings, are they legitimate contenders? And so, no. The answer is no. I'll save the rambling and I'll just say that the answer has been no. Certainly, Oklahoma's had some teams, but we'll get into that later. So, in my opinion, by 2023, 2024, somewhere in that ballpark, before this contract is supposed to be over, it's going to be over. And so that raises the question, are we on our way to 4 power conferences? Listen, okay, I love uniformity. I love when there's uniformity, equity, things are nice and symmetrical, they work out. And so, in my opinion, the best place for college football to go is 4 power conferences of about 16 teams. Each conference has about 8 teams in 2 divisions. The winner of each division plays for a conference championship. Conference champions get an automatic bid into the college football playoff, perhaps even get one of the top 4 seeds. Therefore, a bye in the college football playoff. And then 5 through 12 is an at-large for any other team, whether that's, a conference a conference title game loser, whether that's for just a regular team that doesn't even make the conference title game, whether that's a traditional group of 5 type of a team. 5 through 12 are generally at-large bids, aka where Notre When this Texas and Oklahoma news broke, we saw a graphic. I saw a graphic, which if you're watching on YouTube right now, I have displayed on the screen, where the Big Ten could add schools like Kansas and Iowa State. The SEC goes ahead and adds Oklahoma and Texas. The Pac-12, which would probably then change its name, adds Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. And the ACC adds West Virginia. And in this graphic, it says we add Notre Dame. On this graphic, then, it also includes pods, which in each of these, 4 pods of 4 teams. I don't love that idea, but at least this graphic kind of breaks down, where these teams fit. That said, Notre Dame should not join one of these conferences. Okay, we've talked. It's the age-old topic of conversation that everyone wants to talk about. When's Notre Dame going to feel the pressure? When's Notre Dame going to join a conference? When's Notre Dame going to fully commit to the ACC or another conference? And let me be honest here. I've been one of those guys that have said, if Notre Dame were forced into joining a conference, I'd be okay with that. Okay, I like the independence. I've always liked the independence. Notre Dame benefits from independence. But if college football changes in a way that it would be more beneficial for Notre Dame to join a conference, join a conference. I've said that since day one. I've also said that joining a conference would not be the end of Notre Dame football as we know it, because, Notre Dame plays so many ACC teams. They have rivalries with ACC teams like Miami, Florida State. They're developing. Can you really call it a rivalry if you never win? With Clemson, and I know Notre Dame beat Clemson last year, but they didn't when it mattered. So regardless, Notre Dame has these rivalries with ACC teams built in. If joining the ACC means we play these ACC games, we play USC and maybe Stanford and Navy and an FCS team every year, would it be the worst? No. Would it make Notre Dame's schedule pretty daunting? Yes. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Definitely not. And so, as this new conference realignment maybe starts to take shape, and we go to these 4 mega conferences of 16 teams, this is the perfect time for Notre Dame to do exactly what they've always done and remain independent. Okay, here's why. Okay, under the new college football playoff, if the college football playoff comes out, the committee comes out and says the top 4 seeds will be the champions of each of the conferences, there's going to be all these people that say, Notre Dame needs to join a conference. They need to be eligible for one of these top 4 seeds. No, they do not. Okay? I cannot unequivocally say how very dumb that would be, at least under strictly those parameters. And here's why. Even if Notre Dame is worthy of being one of the top 4 seeds, okay? Even if, a loss in the ACC title game still would have gotten Notre Dame one of the top 4 seeds, Notre Dame would probably be in contention for seeds 5, 6, 7, okay? And so, honestly, under a 12-team playoff, by the way, if there's a chance, Notre Dame should make the playoff every single year in a 12-team playoff. Every single year. And not only that, they should be, in what year recently was Notre Dame not at least in contention to be one of the top 8 teams in college football? If the way that Notre Dame has played and recruited and done all of that and developed over the last couple of years, if Notre Dame can't get in the top 8, then there need to be changes made. Okay, we've talked about how being in and around the college football playoff, as it is with 4 teams, is the goal for Notre Dame every year. Being within the top 8, and in certain years where maybe it's a bad year, being 9 through 12. If Notre Dame can't be in the top 8 to 12 teams in college football every single year, then changes need to be made at this point. Okay, so we're assuming, for the sake of this conversation, that Notre Dame is one of those teams that falls 5, 6, 7, 8. If that were to be the case, okay, if Notre Dame falls in those top however many seeds, okay, they would host, instead of playing in a conference championship game, they would host, and this is, like I say, just a proposed idea at this point, they would host that first college football playoff game on campus in South Bend, probably at some point in December, okay, which, when you start to factor in things like name, image, and likeness, and players wanting to attach themselves to a brand so that they can build their own brand, Notre Dame is going to benefit greatly from that extra home game, which remains to be seen whether that gets to be played on NBC or not. But regardless, it's another nationally televised home game for Notre Dame, which should help recruiting, I might add. And if this were to have happened last year, if, say, Notre Dame gets the 5 seed because they miss out on the top 4 because they're not in a conference, Notre Dame would have played Coastal Carolina. Okay? How cool would Coastal Carolina at Notre Dame in December be? Okay? The year before, to give you an idea, say Notre Dame gets the 5 seed. The year before, 2019, Notre Dame would have hosted Auburn. Okay? Say they got the 6th seed, they would have hosted 11th ranked Utah. Okay, in 2018, say Notre Dame was the 5th seed, they would have hosted 12th ranked Penn State. If they were the 6th seed, they would have hosted 11th ranked LSU. These are all fun, exciting games to bring into South Bend to eliminate the idea of the 13th data point, because guess what? Now Notre Dame doesn't have to have the 13th data point to get into the college football playoff anymore. They get to rest during conference championship week, and then they bring in either a group of 5 team or the loser of one of the Power 5 conference championship games, and they get to play another game under the lights in South Bend. Okay, it's a win-win for Notre Dame. Okay, it can't get any better. So, that said, Notre Dame should not ever, if they want to be a team that gets the extra game, that they play in the college football playoff, that they want to host another game, never, ever, ever join a conference. Because guess what, guys? If you're not good enough to win that 5-12 game, you have no business playing in the top 4 anyways. Okay, so if Notre Dame goes in here and it's a situation where, well, I think Notre Dame's a top 4 team, it sucks that they don't get that bye, but then they go and they lose at home in the 5-12 game. Well, guess what? They shouldn't have gotten it anyway. Okay, so it really allows for a lot more things that make sense in college football, in my opinion. So really, people are going to continue this talk of Notre Dame needs to join a conference. They need to do this or that. They need to, whatever. They need to be involved to be in the college football playoff. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because to be honest with you, if Notre Dame goes and joins the ACC, what are the odds that Notre Dame goes and wins the ACC on a regular basis, at least the way that Clemson has played in the last 5 to 10 years? Is there a great chance of that happening? And then if they lose, they're automatically out of the top 4. Who's to say that they don't lose and slide into the bottom, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you're looking at going to Georgia to play a game. You're looking at going to Ohio State if we're looking at 2018 to play a game. If, say, Ohio State doesn't win the Big Ten, you're looking at going to play at Oregon, at Baylor. If you look at teams that have finished in the 5 to 8 range in the final college football playoff rankings in the last few years, it's just not a good formula. Stay out of the conference championship, sit at home that week of Thanksgiving, and then prepare to play against a team the week after that in one of those 5 to 12 games. And if you're the 5 seed, guess what? You're moving on and you're playing the 4 seed after that. Okay, so I really love how this sets up for Notre Dame. I really love how Notre Dame's independence has really set them up in this particular good place to be in the college football playoff, to have another game where you can have success in December, late December, early January. Maybe this sets up Notre Dame to win the 5-12 matchup, to win the 4-5 matchup, and then next thing you know, you're sitting right there, right on the edge of the championship type game, and you walk your way into contention. Okay, this is where Notre Dame should be, and if you get hot at the right time, it's not possible for other teams to sit and watch Notre Dame film for a whole month before they get to play them, the way that Clemson has, the way that Alabama has, and all of that type of stuff. Then this is the way that Notre Dame gets to the playoffs, or they get to the championship game, is that they get hot at the right time by playing this game against a 12 seed, getting a 4 seed, then getting the 1, moving on, and then maybe even being, if you can pull an upset, being the team that is the favorite to win the championship. So, like I say, I just wanted to get on here today. This actually ended up going quite a bit longer than I wanted it to, but quick recording of in catching up, reintroducing the podcast and all of that type of stuff. My hope with this podcast going forward is that it becomes an interactive podcast where people can chime in with their views. We get people on to talk. We get people, reading their comments if they're not comfortable coming on and that type of stuff. And all of that stuff is coming here in the future. So thanks for welcoming me back. If you stayed this long, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure, like I say, you are subscribing on those places where the podcast can be found and going to YouTube, subscribing there as well, and then making sure that you are getting a notification every single time that we post something on YouTube so that you can stay up to date. So thanks for everything. We'll be back soon with more Notre Dame football stuff. And until next time, go Irish.